Now, when you're writing a script, sometimes you have actors in mind for roles and sometimes you don't. It just depends. It's useful for Fran and I if we actually have a face to one of our characters, because there's two of us writing, we can imagine the same person, which kind of makes some sense. But as it was with The Frighteners, we didn't really think too much about casting. We wrote the character of Frank Bannister and of Lucy and the ghosts, and we wrote them very much, you know, to function within the story that we were creating, and we didn't actually have a particularly strong idea of one actor or another. But once we had this film underway, obviously it was the next problem we had to solve. So we sat down with Bob and we talked about ideas for actors, and Michael Fox's name came up. It was an idea that we liked very much because Michael has a very rare ability of balancing comedy and comic timing with drama. You know, he is very good at both, which is a rare thing, and Bob was obviously very useful at that time because he said, well, I've worked with Michael. I mean, you know, if you like, I can give Michael a call and send him a copy of the script.
So I said, yeah, okay, I'll take a look at it, but I'm not really in the mood to do much. And then the script came, and I mean, it was really good and really compelling. It was obviously unlike anything that I'd ever been offered before and ever read before, and it was clearly the work of a really degeneratively ill person, and or people, as it turned out. And I called Bob up and I said, I don't know what to make of this. This could either be one of the most creative, interesting, innovative movies I've ever seen, or it could be just the worst movie I've ever seen, depending on how it's done. And he said, well, you should go and see Heavenly Creatures. And at that time, it was about to play in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival, so, which is, yeah, a short flight from where I live in Vermont. So I said, you know, okay, great, and I'll do that. And I went up and I met Peter prior to seeing the film, and we had a great conversation. I really liked Peter, and I felt bad. I remember being in the meeting and feeling bad because I wasn't predisposed to do the movie, and I thought, I've met this guy, now I'm going to go see his movie, and then I'm, you know, probably not going to do his film, and, you know, who wants to be in that position? And so then we left and we went down to the theater to see the movie, and about 10 minutes into Heavenly Creatures, I just knew whatever he wanted to do.
He basically said, yeah, I'm on board. I'm yours. You know, which was great because, like, he was the first and only person that we ever, you know, spoke to about that role, and that, you know, that big problem was, like, solved very, very easily.
I'm not sure that Frank Bannister has anything to do with Michael Fox as a person, but I think Michael has always had that dark, quirky sense of humor that he and I share, and he understood the character completely.
It was one of my better acting experiences, and one of the more challenging ones I've ever had. And I felt completely supported by Peter and Fran to try all kinds of different things. I mean, right down to the way that I looked. I figured with Frank, you know, this is a guy who's essentially dead. You know, he's dead for all intents and purposes. He has no reason to live. Everyone who is his friend is dead, so that for him the real world, the world that you or I live in, is something he can't cope with or deal with. So he's kind of like a hermit. So I figured this guy would either have hair down to his ass, or just cut his own hair and cut it all off.
It is a very different type of character that we're used to seeing from Michael, and so I think that's, you know, one of the really fun things about watching the movie.
I don't know, they say that sometimes when you have a traumatic experience that it can alter your perception.
Really? So after that you could just see spirits? I mean, what happened?
How about you talk to Ray, huh?
It was important that Lucy anchors the film in a reality, because there's so much weird stuff happening around her. I mean, Frank is going through all sorts of weird stuff. He can see ghosts. You know, there's the ghosts who are like characters in the film. There's Johnny and Patricia, who are these psychos. Everybody, you know, in the story, Dammers, the FBI guy, you know, they're all kind of weird and out there, and it was critical that we have, you know, one key character who is like an anchor for the audience, someone who grounds the film in reality.
The activity is currently located where?
Well, I don't know. It just went quiet about 5 minutes ago.
Well, quiet. The dining room table spun in a counterclockwise direction.
I don't think that one happened, no.
The toilet seat lid banged up and down.
No.
Did the bed levitate?
Yeah. Yeah, with me on it.
We auditioned maybe 30 or 40 actors to play Lucy, and we were starting to get a bit concerned, and then we saw a tape that was sent to us of Trini Alvarado doing an audition. And, we really liked her performance. We really liked the quality. It's not just a performance thing, it's a quality of who she is, and it kind of like comes across on screen, a very rational, calm, with a, lovely sense of humour.
So when I went to New Zealand and I met them, I was a little bit nervous, but I had seen pictures of Peter from articles of his other pictures and stuff, and I thought he had a very sweet face.
I'm reviving him at 9 o'clock.
Why would we want to do that?
Lucy's character is a very active character, and she isn't afraid of throwing a punch. And I love that about the way Peter and Fran developed her. She's a strong female figure, and there are a lot of female characters, strong female characters in this, and I love that about the Frighteners.
You must think I'm very stupid. Excuse me.
Trini, besides being a really talented actress, has this really great ethereal kind of haunted look that really always drew me in and drew me into her Lucy as a character, and the movie and where my character was and what he was supposed to be going through. I could always find answers in Trini's eyes and expressions.
Casting the ghost was a lot of fun because with the three ghosts, with the Cyrus, Stuart and the judge, we wanted to cast actors that were going to basically help us with the script, because these were roles that had to be funny, kind of wisecracking guys coming out with good one-liners, and Fran and I had a go at all this in our draft of the script, but we're not great at doing that sort of writing. And so we thought, well, if we cast, like comics or stand-up comics or guys who, actors who have good comic ability, then we're going to get a lot of input into the script and can hopefully, make it funnier. And so we started to look around for these sorts of guys, and we found Jim Fyfe pretty quickly.
I auditioned a couple of times by myself. And that was kind of like you were supposed to stand there and just basically hallucinate, because they wanted to see actors who could, act against a blue screen. So you had to just stand there and go like.
And what we actually did was we kept calling him back into auditions time and time again.
I guess at that point they knew that they wanted me, but they couldn't actually tell me that. So I just kind of had to keep coming back and auditioning with different guys to play Cyrus.
Victoria Burrows, our casting director, had mentioned Shai McBride's name early, but had said to us that Shai didn't want to come in and audition. He had read the script and he didn't particularly, like it, or he didn't think it was funny enough.
I thought that Cyrus's role was written a little stereotypical, and it was a little underwritten, and I wasn't going all the way over to New Zealand to do 2 lines, so I decided that I didn't want to do it.
About 2 or 3 months later, I think we were getting really desperate, and we said to Victoria, look, have you got any more ideas? And she says, well, there is Shai, I could try Shai again. And we said, well, just, reiterate to him the fact that we want him to contribute to the script, that if he doesn't think it's funny enough now, then that's okay, because it's our intention of, getting as much input from him as we can and making it funnier.
Now, once I saw Heavenly Creatures, I said, maybe I might want to work with this guy. So, but I still was a little worried, and the only way I agreed to go into the audition is if I could go in and do pretty much whatever I wanted to do.
He was very, very funny. He was improvising. He wasn't even sticking to our script.
Why are you always letting him scare you? You the ghost. Look, man, I'm not worried about going back to the cemetery, okay? First of all, 2 reasons. Death was the best thing that ever happened to me because I had bad credit. Second of all, there's 15% more legroom in my casket than is in the trunk of that car. So you can stay here whining and complaining and getting mad and stuff, but I'm getting what I want. I'm going to be riding in the front, and besides, I'm getting ready to play some music. I need to relax. I'm going to tell you, if you lock me up in that trunk again, I'm getting some more black ghosts, and we're going to march. We're calling Jesse. We're going to have the African-American Apparition Coalition. We can't work under these conditions, and you're going to be in a lot of trouble with a lot of black ghosts. And it ain't nothing worse than a bunch of brothers that's pissed off that's already dead. So I would advise you to just reupholster your seats and get some plastic, do whatever you're gonna do. B, is that you? Benny, my again. You know what? You really need to change your haircut. You're getting a little long in the back, Andy. Why don't you let me trim it? You know something, Benjamin? I've been meaning to tell you. You're going down a very crooked road. You don't want to end up another statistic, another African-American male stuck behind bars. Like Mike Tyson. You don't want to be sitting right there doing 1,000 push-ups a day and 555 sit-ups a day. And you know you have to change your name because Mike is a Muslim now. Now it's Mike X.
Peter Jackson once said that if I didn't get the job, he was just going to take everything that I said in the auditions and just put it in the script. You dirty bastard.
I never met Shai before, you know, on the plane down there. And we just hit it off immediately. He's great. He's really, really a funny guy. He's a terrific actor, and he's just got a great philosophy. And we had a blast working together.
Don't touch my leg, man. Don't touch my leg. Because people will see this, and the next thing you know, I'll be, you know, doing those kind of movies where people are like, well, is he really? I don't know what he is, but I love him.
That's such a big, strong black ghost. You know what I'm saying?
A lot of my work with them, they weren't on camera, and they didn't do their work until later. And yet there wasn't a day when those guys didn't really bust their humps, you know, to provide me with an idea of what the scene was going to be and what they were going to do. And I always remember being really moved by that and appreciative of it. Mary, help me.
The character of the judge was another difficult one to cast, and it's difficult in a different sense because with the judge we were using a lot of prosthetic makeup that was basically going to cover his face. Like whoever the actor was going to have nothing visible apart from his eyes because there was so much makeup on. And yet, you know, we wanted a character and a personality to project through the rubber. And, you know, some actors kind of get buried in it and you know, you don't ever see them again.
This town is in deep trouble.
One of the problems with auditioning the judge was that we didn't have the makeup actually ready for them to wear because it has to be made, you know, for the actor, the specific actor. And so we were auditioning judges without any makeup on and having to imagine what they were like. John Astin did a really delightful audition where it was clear, you know, with his incredibly expressive eyes that no matter what you put on his face, you know, you were still going to get this wonderful character and personality coming through.
No more hauntings left in me. Why, hell, I could hardly rustle up a scare.
I think the judge represents a kind of character that we're all familiar with in Western films, and this I think this is a kind of transplanting of this kind of character into an environment with which he's completely unfamiliar, ill at ease. I don't think he adjusts very well to modern life.
We got Rick Baker to design us the makeup of the judge. He was very happy to work with John Astin and you know, and to actually come up with a look for this character. And that was all done at Rick's studio in Los Angeles, and John would go in for various fittings and, you know, developing this makeup, and Rick would send me videotapes and photographs and show me what it was like. And when John came out to New Zealand to do the film, Rick sent Brian Pennicus to apply the makeup, which at that point in time was about a 5-hour makeup, I think, for John to have to go through. He had to have, you know, his head covered with the judge's sort of like wig, and the makeup was partly prosthetics and partly stipple, which is this, you know, where you apply the rubber latex to the actor's skin and stretch it and relax it so it gets wrinkles, you know, appearing in it, and so it was a very time-consuming makeup.
I've been on stage thousands of times. I've been in many films and television shows, and I've done hundreds of different makeups, but nothing really compares to this. This goes way beyond. And it wasn't until we did the first makeup tests that I began to see and feel exactly who this character was.
The idea of casting actors who could contribute to the script, you know, really paid off for us, especially during rehearsals. We rehearsed for about 2 weeks before we started shooting.
We flew down to New Zealand a couple of weeks prior to the beginning of shooting, and we go over to Peter and Fran's house. They got this great house on the water, and they have this room at the back that's just all videos and you know, big comfortable fluffy furniture, and they'll flake out and watch movies there. And all the actors gathered in there, and we just read through all the scenes and just improvised things and made suggestions and came up with lines. And in a lot of cases we had to re-vernacularize their writing because they'd written it certain phrases and certain ideas in Kiwi speak that we as American actors knew that American audiences wouldn't relate to.
Peter and Fran were really great about soliciting our ideas, and Michael too, because in a film like this, when you're working with a big star, the big star, you know, kind of gets to say what's going to go on, and to some extent too.
It was really like a lot of fun because we'd have the chance to be as wild and over the top as we cared to be. And you know, he was really stressing that it was more important for us to go as far over the top as we possibly could and let him reel us back in than for us to just be timid and scared and trying to be safe. So we just pretty much did whatever we wanted, and we just said the first things that came to our mind within the context of the scene. And a lot of the stuff stuck, and Peter kept it, and they would videotape it, and then they would go and write the dialogue, and the next day we'd have new pages. Like every day we'd have a different color page, and we were like running out of colors.
The thing that I remember that was really odd was they didn't have a tape recorder, so what he did was he took his camcorder and he put it in the middle of the floor and used it just to record sound, which I thought was really funny for a guy who was pretty much of a self-confessed tech weenie and gadget freak, that he couldn't come up with a tape recorder.
So let's just have a go. Okay, so you're stuck in the wall. Maybe we start with like that line at the top of the page, "Loose up, man, come on, particleize," or whatever it turns out to be. Yeah. And just go through into the music thing, and we'll try and snatch you a couple of bits of dialogue if we can.
It would be great. Yeah, it'd be great if we just got stuck and we just stopped, and the argument just continued with me in the door making whatever point, and then he goes, and then I'm still stuck, and I forget that I'm stuck.
What I'll do actually then is just after this line, whatever it's going to be. Come on, you could have swung covers around, flash a few lights, but give me something to work with because I'm on my way. So I said, give me something to work with. Come on, Stuart, in or out now.
Oh, that ain't right, man. You don't take your frustrations out on Stuart. You know the boy can't help getting stuck. The guy's anal retentive.
I'm very upset. Now, can someone please help me?
Stuart should think Frank's gone.
Yeah.
But
so
you should start to really bitch about the way that Frank's making you guys work.
Yeah.
That business partners thing is good. I mean, that would be the sort of thing that Stuart might well say.
And we're supposed to be his business partners. What a joke.
Okay, we still have a problem as to where the second scene goes, though. Because at the moment we have the mail, then we have the talk about the creditors,
right.
Then we have the ghost doing like this gag.
No.
What happens
is that?
No, we had to talk about the creditors. We have the judge saying he's too old and he's heading back to the cemetery.
Right.
What happens is this:
then Frank's in that puts Frank in a reflective mood, and he's up in his room, and then the guys burst in and scare the hell out of him.
So this stuff goes on in the morning. Frank goes out to the mailbox. He gets the thing. He goes. He's out there with his coffee can, and he gets it. And he goes, right. We're gonna have this conversation right now. He goes in and says, "Yo, everybody, sit down, listen. These are bills. These are bills. This is my situation. Blah 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 blah. You got it." And then he has a conversation with the judge, who's saying, "You know what? I can't play this game anymore. That's just too much." Then I kind of have a go away, and I'm having a moment, and then they do this thing, and I say, "Fuck you! Don't ever do that." And they're like, "Ooh, touch the button there."
Well, I think we can still probably play it the way we've got it. Is we in the moment they go touchy, and then we just go to the dog howling. I mean, I think it's got a good mood in the driveway the next morning. What's up with Rustler? The judge is sitting at the cemetery, and then because I still like the visual thing of the sitting in the car watching the funeral procession pass by, which I think is you know who's doing this, Frank. I mean, I think that we can't get anything better than that of actually seeing the thing.
But that's the point of it. The point of the compaction or whatever you're looking for here is to find the strongest attitude, and that's the strongest attitude to be there to have that stuff happening in the background.
There was another element of improvisation that really happened on the set while we were shooting as well, because often, especially in the case of Shy and McBride, we'd get to certain lines when, you know, we'd have something in the script, and we'd say to Shai, well, have you got any other ideas for this, and just for this line, anything, you know, can you come up with something funnier? And he says, yeah, I think I can, but just like roll the camera and we'll see what happens.
And action. That's it. You can kiss my ass, Frank. Ain't gonna be no more huntings until we get some gun control in the house. Action. You know, one of the reasons I was glad I was dead was because I thought I wouldn't have to worry about getting killed no more. Action. You know, you ain't even safe around this place when you're dead, you senile old bastard. Action. Fuck you, Judge. You know, if I wanted to get shot at every day, I'd move my black ass to Los Angeles.
They covered me with a blue like cape, like a poncho. I delivered my lines, and it gave the appearance that I was just appearing from a drain pipe.
Set. Yo, Frank, how's it hanging?
I don't know, Cyrus, you tell me.
Yeah, what's 10 inches long and white? Right, nothing.
Oh, hey, come on, I told you guys, get the hell out of my body.
Hey, come on, Frank. Look, we want to call a meeting, man. We got a wrap.
Hey, Cyrus, I gotta take a leak, and I'm not getting out of the shower.
Goodbye.
A small town called Littleton, which is in the South Island of New Zealand, just outside of Christchurch, was chosen as a primary location for Fairwater, where our film's set. And we spent about 5 weeks in Littleton in a very, very wet winter of 1995, shooting any sequences that were like outside the town, in the high street and in the cemetery. We had to make this small New Zealand town look like America, of course, and so we had to find American vehicles because we drive on the other side of the road. We were lucky that Christchurch, which was very close by, is the base for Operation Deep Freeze, the American Antarctic base, and so there's a lot of American personnel at the base who have brought their cars over. So we were able to borrow a lot of their vehicles for the street scenes. We had to do a lot of work on the street signs, you know, just to generally make this place look like small town America.
I think the hardest thing is the logistics of having a movie being shot halfway around the world in New Zealand, but in a strange way it gives the movie a wonderfully unique look and a very important surreal quality, which is the appropriate for the tone of the movie. But it's very hard to make a movie when it's all being done, you know, in a 14.5-hour airplane flight away.
How old am I? I'm 106. Well, 100 in dog years. I'm 30. I'll be 34 next week. 2 weeks. Any other questions? Yeah?
You have to get it right.
Yes.
You have to do it over and over again so they can get the right one.
Yeah, I know. It's silly, isn't it? You do it over and over again because, see, there's camera guys and sound guys, and there's people who are in charge of making sure that every time we do it, it looks the same. You happy, man? And there are people that are in charge of the lights, and there are people that are in charge of the cars and the people. And so what has to happen on every take is every single one of those people has to get their job done right. And usually it's my fault, and I don't get my job done right, but that's what we do. We do it every time, and every time after it's done, we look and go, are you happy, are you happy, are you happy? And if everybody gets, you know, gets what they want, then we can do the next thing.
Tráilers. Visita mi canal.
Ready and action!
The location at Littleton was also used for scenes with Frank Bannister's house up on the hill above the town. We built the house so that we could shoot it inside it and outside it, because the idea with the house is that Frank had got halfway through building it when he was a young architect. His wife had died and he had sort of stopped any further work on it, so it was supposed to be a half-finished house, and it meant that we had these big windows that he'd made that hadn't got any glass in them, and we wanted a lot of the outside to be present when we were inside the house.
Cigars.
You've been promising to buy me a box of cigars.
Cyrus, I hate to break this to you, but you're dead.
Of course, The Frighteners has a lot of special effects, a huge number of special effects, which is part of the fun for me because I just love doing effects. It's like being a magician, it's like being a kid in a toy shop in a way. I'm very fortunate because down here in New Zealand I have a involvement in a special effects company called Weta, and so I'm able to have, I guess, a lot more hands-on involvement in effects than what a director would probably be used to overseas. Weta comprises two departments. One of them is the creature shop, which makes miniatures and monsters and various things, and that's headed by Richard Taylor.
This is the sculpting room. We start our designs by coming up with a number of drawings which we show to the director, then take them a little bit further into little three-dimensional maquettes, which are small sculptures that he can then look at and view. And finally, when we've got a design that he likes, we then begin the task of sculpting it up in clay or plasticine. As you follow me around, you can see a number of examples of things we've got on the go at the moment.
Richard and I go back to Meet the Feebles. He built some of the puppets for me, and he did a lot of effects on Brain Dead and Heavenly Creatures. The other half of Weta is the digital department, the computer department, and that was really came together on Heavenly Creatures. We did about 30 CG, computer generated shots for that movie, and we only had one computer at the time, but at least we got the hang of how to do this stuff, and we sort of solved some of the problems ourselves and figured out the basic process. So when it came time to do The Frighteners, I was very keen to do all the effects down in New Zealand. It's not just a sort of ego thing because it's my company or anything like that. It's really a practical thing for me because as the director of the film I have to have such a close contact with the effects to make sure that that they're done as efficiently as possible. If you've got over 500 shots as we had on The Frighteners, you can't afford for people to be going off in the wrong direction for too long. I've always got to look at what's happening and to steer people the right way so that we can be as efficient as possible. They can get that shot finished to move on to the next.
Stuart, I mean, what's he going to look like?
Because The Frighteners has so many computer shots, I think it would be quite good if we just had a look at that process. It begins on film. We shoot the film as we would normally, with a 35mm camera. And then that piece of film, the negative, has to go through the system of being scanned into a computer. So we should probably find someone who can explain that to us.
Right. This is where it's really happening. I'm not sure what the rest of those people were telling you, but in point of fact, this facility right here, the machine room at Weta Digital, is the center of digital activity here. There's actually three distinct processes that you have to go through when you're working on digital effects for film. The first is the actual digitization of the scanned elements. The second is the processing that happens throughout the facility, and the third is the recording of those elements finally out to film. Normally what happens is this unit actually takes filmed elements that we've received edited decision lists for and digitizes them into a format that is readable by the machines in the facility. Typically, a scanned element at 2K resolution is about 9 megabytes worth of information. In typical Hollywood terms, a digital effect is considered about 5 seconds long, about 5 discrete elements. That might be a background plate, a composited element on top of that, a miniature, a computer model, those kinds of elements. It typically takes between 1.5 to 2 gigabytes of storage space to store those elements. One shot in this facility can take as much as 10 gigabytes of storage space. To address that need, at the height of The Frighteners, when we were really crunching through the shots, we had almost 1.6 terabytes of disk space available throughout the facility. The last step after the actual digital processing is the recording of the final digital images onto film. That happens here. This is a Solitaire Cine 3 recorder. We actually have 2 of them in the facility. It takes about 35 to 36 seconds to actually record the finished digital image back out into film. That happens, it's queued up here by an operator, shot onto this camera. We send it off to the lab for processing and then check the print. How's that?
I know that there was some concern from Universal as to whether we could actually do all the visual effects in New Zealand, which was fair enough. I mean, this is a studio that's used to dealing with the very biggest American companies, and we're naturally afraid. So we devised a little strategy amongst ourselves that we would finish one of the ghost scenes as quickly as we could. And this coincided quite well with Bob Zemeckis' first visit down to New Zealand, which was about 2 or 3 weeks after we began shooting.
We're trying to pick out the West Coast town that this is. It's like a Morro Bay. Morro Bay with a little surreal smell. Right. And of course. I was wondering if I was going to see you or not today. Jesus Christ. Does this happen every time? Yeah, good to see you.
And Bob was going to come down just to have a look and say hi to people and see how we were going. And we thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had, you know, one of the ghost scenes actually finished to show Bob at that stage.
Scene 28 was a good scene to work on because it really extended us into all sorts of areas. It contained a variety of different effects that we would use later in the film. Obviously the ghosts were there, so we had to develop our whole ghost look.
We would like to cruise with some style, man.
You know, you guys left me high and dry tonight. I get to the house, nothing's happening. Couldn't believe it.
Ultimately, it was a little hurried because we were still experimenting with how the ghost effect would look over a variety of backgrounds.
We only had 2 weeks to do it because we only just shot this footage and then he was arriving. So the guys like worked around the clock and they did all the shots. There's like 12 or 14 shots in the scene.
That fellow takes us totally for granted. And we're supposed to be his business partners. What a joke.
Bob turned up in New Zealand and we sat him down to show him Scene 28. He didn't realise that like all the computer guys had been working for 2 weeks with virtually no sleep to get the scene finished. But we ran it for him and he just watched it quietly, and then at the end I remember he turned to us and he said, "Well, guys, it looks like we've got a real movie on our hands." And I remember that was, you know, really exciting because it just told everybody that he was impressed, and he is the guy that you want to impress.
The Frighteners has a lot of computer graphic shots. I mean, more than I've ever had in any of my movies. They are, I mean, it's a movie that is a computer graphics extravaganza.
Tight you can pick up sticks with your butt cheeks. Loosen up, just pull out a collide, there you go. Damn.
The problem at that stage became not one of, you know, are we going to do the effects, because I think it was pretty much decided that we would be doing all the effects. But the problem was just the sheer size of the job, the recruiting of more people, getting more computers in, making sure that the facility was able to handle it all. One of the things that we decided to do was to ask Wes Takahashi to join the team as visual effects supervisor. He was based in the States and he'd worked at ILM for, you know, some 12 or 15 years. And we thought that somebody of his experience was going to be very important in guiding us through this incredibly complex year that was in front of us.
The one shot that inspired me to, for the most part, to come down here was one in which Cyrus walks towards the camera and his head envelops a light bulb.
You gotta just walk up to Frank, just look him in the eye and just say, "Frank, give me what I want, I'm gonna bust your ass!"
And my whole head was glowing. And when I spoke, you know, my eyes were really bulging and I was really, really upset. And I delivered a line and it came out in light beams. It was unbelievable. It was fantastic. And they cut it out. They cut it out of the film.
I can stretch my body out to 30 feet in length using Hindu breathing techniques. I really gotta say, I think that's what got me the job, you know? And then it was cut from the film, so it was kind of a come down for me, but I'm glad it's back in the Laserdisc.
I wanted the ghosts to look like traditional ghosts because, you know, in a movie like this where you've got so many shots of ghosts in the film and they're a fundamental part of the movie, they're characters in the film, I didn't want to have something that was going to like confuse audiences, something that didn't really look ghost-like, you know, something kind of weird and people would be saying, "Oh, are these ghosts or are they?" At the same time, I also didn't want to do a shortcut where we have the ghosts appearing solid so we can like film them in the same room, you know. I mean, that's fine and it demands a leap of imagination, but I wanted our film to be a little bit more straightforward than that just, you know, we kind of imagine that ghosts are transparent and they have a little glow around them. I mean, I think most people have this image of what a ghost looks like in their mind, and I wanted just to target just directly at that image, and so that there was no thinking involved. You could just listen to the dialogue they were saying and watch the movie and follow the story and not be confused about who these guys or what these guys were.
They're ghosts, but they take on their personality, and their shape is of their corpse that is also, you know, buried and rotting in the ground. They come from different times, and they have different looks, and they're a little bit creepy, but they're a little bit fun, and you know, so there's quite a bit of an edge to them too. So you take them really real. So you're not sitting there watching anything that's 100% light. But at the same time, it's not so dark that it's repulsive in any way. So it's a wonderful blend of that, and I think that that's something that's really interesting about the way the film looks.
What are the physics of a ghost? Can it pass through objects? And if it can pass through objects, how come it can stand on the floor? And all of these had to be defined with our ghosts. And do they cast shadows? Are shadows cast upon them? Are they illuminating? Do they produce their own light? How much transparency do they have? Are they three-dimensional? Should they distort the backgrounds?
Because they were transparent, they tended to inherit the colours of what was behind them. I mean, we could see what was behind them. So if we put one against a dark background and one against a bright red wall, we'd see some differences, but we wanted to keep them looking the same throughout the movie. One of the things we developed with software here was the ability to change their colours. So this is our ghost control program called Set Spook that we use to define the look of the ghost for every single shot. And we can control various things here, like the size of his glow, how strong they were on the screen, their colour, how much the background got distorted through them.
In addition to the standard ghost shot, where they're just standing in the room talking, there's a number of shots where special things have to happen to the ghosts. One of the most common techniques was called rotoscoping, which is how you make a ghost pass through a doorway or fall through the floor. Basically, the rotoscoper has to draw a little line around their body using a mouse and literally animates them through the floor frame by frame. It's a very time-consuming and tedious process. The rotoscoping was relatively straightforward, but we occasionally had some complicated shots where 3D animation had to be added to the two-dimensional ghosts. A good example of that is the shot where Stuart has arrived back at Frank's house and he's feeling car sick and his cheeks are swelling with ectoplasmic vomit.
I built a 3D Stuart head, and then we projected the footage onto that. The catch was that had to be match moved to Stuart's actions over the course of a very long shot. Ultimately, it was a match move that had to be the angle and position and size of Stuart's face. The computer model that I made had to be matched to the live action. Once that was done, then it was relatively easy to be able to inflate the cheeks up and back down again. The ears were also match moved, so that then using a dynamics program we've got called Dynamation, it was easy enough to have it emit a whole lot of particles with the characteristics of puke, that puke and zero gravity, as in there was gravity pointing up, the particles once they were emitted wanted to flock together. But the catch was that since they were coming out so fast, for every frame of blobs we had to actually produce 10 frames so that we could combine them all together to give us motion blurred blobs. So ultimately about 5,000 frames of blobs were rendered, which was the other reason why that shot took so long.
Occasionally we had to build a 3D model of an entire ghost. For instance, the scene where Stuart gets fired out of the exhaust pipe of the car, that was a quite a simple model that Matt Aiken built. He was able to animate the wireframe model sort of like oozing out of the exhaust pipe and then take photographic textures of the actor and paste that over the top of the wireframe model, and with enough motion blur, you know, you just see this computer generated ghost whizzing past and we get away with it because it's so quick. Another ghost shot which, you know, needed something extra is the one where Frank sprays fly spray into Stuart's face. I know that my initial idea with that shot was something very simple and probably rather boring, where the fly spray like hits his head, and it just blows his head into the air in a sort of a swarm of particles, and it just comes back together. And that was kind of like all I could think of.
Peter was a little unsure about exactly what he wanted to see in the shot. I had a couple of ideas. We played around with it for about a day, I believe, and at the end of that we showed it to him, and pretty much it was a first time final.
We both just started getting into it and got a little bit carried away, and so we decided to go very gory, because we both figured that we were working for Peter Jackson, so he would have to like it one way or the other.
And it's like a hole blows in the middle of Stuart's head, and his eyeballs are hanging off little sort of bits of tendons, and his tongue is flapping, and it was like way beyond anything I ever imagined. And I just thought, wow, this is great, you know, and that's why what I love about working with you know, creative people is that the more of those sorts of ideas that can be thrown into the mix, that's better than stuff that I can come up with. It's just, you know, makes the film so much better. Probably my most favourite shot in the movie, in terms of a special effects shot, is the one in the kitchen where Michael kills a fly. There's a fly buzzing around, and he slaps it, and a little dead body of a fly kind of falls out of his hand. And that's just Michael miming the action and doing the thing with his hands, and then we added a little CG fly into the shot afterwards. And it's such a simple shot that people don't think of being a special effect, you know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people thought we trained flies to actually, like, you know, to get right into the target zone that Michael could slap them. We occasionally used to have a mix of CG and puppetry. For instance, where Stuart gets hit by the Reaper's scythe and he falls to the floor and collapses. I wanted, you know, an effect of Stuart's carcass just imploding on itself, as if all the ectoplasmic life force had suddenly dispersed, and that was achieved by starting out with a shot of Jim Fife falling to his knees, and he'd just dropped below the level of the camera, and then we would pick him up again as he fell to the floor. We'd tilt down, but at this stage we had switched to a rubber puppet.
We would inflate it with a vacuum cleaner, and then on action quickly put the vacuum cleaners onto reverse and suck all the air out, giving the feeling that the scythe had punctured Stuart's head and squashed the character to the ground, making him look like a flat pancake.
What we were able to do was to have, you know, our computerized ghosted Stuart with a CG Reaper hitting the top of his head, and then as the camera tilts down, we changed to the rubber model that Richard had made halfway through the shot, and that's what we see being sucked down to the floor. The judge was a ghost who did need very special treatment, particularly in the shot where he walks across the room and we see very clearly that his torso is missing, that he just has a skeletal remains, you know, a spine and rib cage.
Frame by frame it had to be positioned and bent to match the judge's movement, and that was probably the longest part of the shot, was just locking that spine in there as he came towards us, turned around and sat down.
Could soon be time to lay my bones.
No. You're my go-to guy. Without you, I'm out of business, Judge.
It's frightening. It's a young man's game, Frank. I ain't got no more hauntings left in me.
I mean, that's a great shot, but it did take a hell of a lot of time to do, and perceptive members of the audience may notice that the judge has his coat buttoned up throughout the rest of the film, so we didn't need to have to do that every time we saw him.
Tus tráilers.
Every time we have a ghost scene where we have, like, you know, Michael J. Fox, for instance, you know, talking with the ghosts, which happens a lot in the movie, we had to shoot Michael and the ghosts separately. You know, Michael on the stage by himself, and then the ghosts in front of a blue screen by themselves, and that takes, you know, twice as long as a normal scene to shoot, because you've got two different bits to do before you can actually put them both together. And then what also increases the time is the fact that if you want to move the camera, if you want to do anything where the camera's moving around with the actors during the course of these ghost scenes, you have to have it controlled by a motion control unit, which is like something you mount the camera on this big robotic machine, basically, that moves the camera, pans it and tilts it and tracks it along and cranes it up and down. And those camera moves are recorded by a computer. So if you've tracked along and panned with Michael, then 2 or 3 months later you set up the same rig again in front of a blue screen and you pan and track with the ghosts, and the camera moves at exactly the same speed. It doesn't alter at all. And so you can then put the two pieces of film together and they stay locked together.
$15,000, guys. I need it quick.
When we did the Back to the Future ones, we had to do all of those elements on the same day. So whatever it was that we shot, whether it was in Back to the Future 3, for example, it was me as 3 different people in the same scene. So I'd do it in makeup and all that stuff, and I'd do one character, and then I'd go away and change, and I'd come back and I'd do it again with another character, go away and change, come back. And it made for long, excruciatingly uncomfortable days sometimes. But they couldn't take a chance that there'd be an earthquake or something that would bump or jar the camera. But by the time we did the Frighteners, the technology had improved to the point where you could do it months later, that it would remember exactly what to do. For me, it was real helpful because I could sense when it was moving, when the camera was moving independently, and I could hear it and sometimes see it peripherally and knew that was then a cue that the action had progressed, and so I knew from rehearsal what was now happening. If the camera was starting to go this way, I think, okay, now this is where the ghosts started to go across the room. And it's amazing. It's amazing technology.
We were very lucky with motion control because these big cumbersome bits of machinery, are so slow to use, and I know that in the States it's quite common that you can only get 1 or 2 shots a day done, and we were lucky. We could usually get 6 or 7 motion control shots in a day because we were using a rig that was invented by a New Zealand grip called Harry Harrison, and his rig was based on a regular dolly that he'd converted, and he'd added motion control motors to it, all these drive belts, and he'd sort of built this thing himself basically in like his workshop.
That fellow takes us totally for granted.
So motion control was essential because I obviously wanted to move the camera a lot. This time-consuming process meant that we had to have 7 months to shoot the film. It was as simple as that. Occasionally it was difficult to shoot the ghost actors against blue screen in the studio because sometimes our shots were shots of the ghosts walking up difficult terrain, like in the cemetery in Littleton especially, where we wanted to see their feet contacting with the ground. The way we overcame that was to shoot the ghosts against blue screen on the location. Of course, this added another complication to the mix because now the guys carrying the blue screen had to race around behind the actor, and sometimes it got kind of difficult. I remember there's a couple of moments where they collided with shop frontages in Littleton High Street. I think the most difficult aspect of the whole motion control blue screen side of things for the actors was the timing. Especially the ghost actors. They had it worse because when we were shooting Michael, we would be following him around the room, he'd be doing his actions, and we would be recording the camera movement with a computer. And then when it came time to shoot the ghosts, what they were acting to is a pre-recorded camera move.
So you as an actor now, all of a sudden, the camera's not following your moves, but you're trying to make it look like it's following your moves because it's on a preset thing. So if you're early or you're late to your mark, it's, okay, we got to try it again. So that's how you get into stuff like take 42.
I want to kill her now, Patty. Oh, that'll give us 41. That's 8 clear, Gacy. Another 9 and I won't be able to talk.
It's difficult for the actors to shoot this type of scene because, of course, what they're used to doing on a set is to basically have each other to bounce off. And, actors feed off each other to get energy for their own performance. And so, when you have interplay between characters, it's like, it's obviously great if everybody's in the same room doing it together because they're helping each other. And then when in the case, the Frighteners, we had to take all the ghosts away, and Michael had to do this himself, and he had to keep his energy levels up, and he had to absolutely be performing as if they were right there. And then the ghosts had to do the same thing. They didn't have Michael in the blue screen. They had to act into little sticks and pieces of tape as well.
Come on, let's go, man.
Frank,
did you hear what I said? We got to
snap out of it, man.
I mean, people often ask me, it must have been really difficult for the actors without having each other there, and I think to a certain extent it is, but on the other hand, you know, actors are used to pretending. I mean, that's what they're paid to do. They're professional pretenders.
You know, pretending that there's a ghost here, or pretending that things are happening around me that aren't, it's just an extension of acting. One of the difficult things, I think the worst thing I could say about acting to ghosts or acting to things that aren't there is that a lot of times I get bad headaches because you'd be focusing on a piece of space. You're not looking at a still object or an animate object. You're looking at a place in space.
And it's not like you can just turn in the direction of that, let's say that wall over there, and look at that, because when the final print is done, it will look like you're looking through that person or past that person instead of at that person. So you have to focus on nothing, like right here, and you feel like you're going cross-eyed. I mean, many days I would go home with a migraine headache because, you know, I've been focusing on nothing all day.
To me, that was not that difficult because it's just going back to a very basic level of play. You know, like my little girl does. You know, when you say dragon, she sees a dragon. That doesn't have to be a dragon there. It could be a tree, it could be nothing. And you just go back to that level of pure pretend. I mean, it's when you have actual things and people that you have to react to that you run into problems.
Compared to what Trini had to do, it was fairly easy, because what Trini had to do was she had to interact with somebody who was interacting with things that weren't there, and she was not aware of what wasn't there. So it was even more of a suspension of disbelief and even more of a challenge. She had the most difficult, I think, role in the film.
It was also challenging to be attacked by ghosts and things that weren't there when they really weren't there. I was being choked by a computer graphic and just reacting to that, just choking myself, basically. I always felt like the crew was laughing at me, and I think they were.
Doing cameos in my movies is just a fun thing I do. It's like the old Hitchcock, you know, gag of being in your own movies, and it just makes it a fun day for the crew as well, to have the director walking around in some stupid costume. And in The Frighteners, it was on Littleton High Street, and I was this heavy metal biker guy, and I had these fake rings that we made out of a bit of bent wire that had been snipped with wire cutters, and they were really sharp, and I had to stick them in my lips, and it was quite painful, and had to spend most of the day dressed like this because, you know, I have to get into my costume at the beginning of the day, and that's it for the rest of the day. And it just happened to be the one day in the whole movie that the production had also decided to bring TV crews onto the set. I didn't realize this, and so they were filming, you know, me directing the movie, and this is the way I was dressed, and a couple of the TV items that went out didn't actually mention that this was my costume, and so I was thinking, oh no, what are my parents going to think? They're going to see this on TV and they're going to think their son has gone weird, and it was kind of embarrassing.
Am I supposed to take the director seriously when he's dressing?
When it came time to cut the movie for the cinemas, I just looked at it and I thought, well, this is just a little bit self-indulgent, and so I was, you know, I was man enough to cut myself out of the film, certainly cut the close-up out of the film anyway. Asshole. Actually, I'm not the only Jackson who appears in The Frighteners. The scene with the flying babies was a scene that we shot a few weeks later, and we were trying to find a little smiley baby, the key baby who's hanging from the bouncer, and he had to be a happy little chap, and Fran and I did the only thing we could possibly think of, which was to cast our own son, Billy Jackson, in the role. Billy was about 3.5 months old when we shot the film.
Kiss. All right, kid, quit jumping around and acting like a baby. This is serious.
Now, we're gonna scare the living daylights out of your parents. So, come on, kid, you gonna help us out? Are you with us?
See? He gets it. The kids always get it.
It didn't always go that smoothly, I remember, with the filming. There was one moment where we were ready to shoot, you know, a close-up of Billy, and he was nowhere to be found, and we realised that he was asleep. You know, it was his nap time. Me being the father, I was given the job of having to go and sort of wake him up, and he didn't like that at all, and we, you know, shot footage of him, but it was not particularly successful. He was not a happy guy getting woken out of his little morning nap.
because this is supposed to take place in America and we were down there in New Zealand, they needed every American they could get their hands on, because all Kiwis think that they could do American accent. Like, oh, I can do an American accent. Give me a cheeseburger. And you just laugh. Just like when I would try to do my Kiwi accent, they would just fall down laughing like uncontrollably. So they needed anybody. So my wife is an actress, so I said, hey, how about, Leslie being in it, and so she's the screaming maid in the Mrs. Waterhouse sequence featuring superstar actor Billy Jackson.
Mrs. Waterhouse! Mrs. Waterhouse!
Whoa, damn! Yeah, man! This one did like poo-poo!
Billy even got to do special effects shots, because we had to shoot some stuff of him in front of the blue screen. And the poor little guy was in his little bouncer suspended on wires in front of the blue screen stage, and I think he was there for so long that he'd occasionally fall asleep.
You're asking me about my experiences working with 3-month-old superstar Billy Jackson? The finest actor it's ever been my pleasure to work with? It was an honor.
He was so great in the film. He's incredible charisma, and I was really happy that he made his debut in our movie. But I had a lot of good times with Billy when I'd go over to Peter and Fran's house and just hang out. I mean, I remember going one day and I missed my kids so much there was nothing for me to just go, and I picked up Billy one day and he I could tell he needed a change of he needed his diaper changed. And I just, without even thinking, just started to, Fran must have thought I was a gift from God, because I just started changing his diaper because I was just so used to it. It's something I'd been doing for years. And so besides having a chance to work with Billy, Billy was like, in some ways, my surrogate kid, when I was over there, and it was really sweet. He's probably like in college by now.
It's kind of interesting to show him the shots of himself when he's 3.5 months, because I don't think he really knows who it is.
Gosh, you didn't have very much hair then, did you? Who's that? Is it you? No, you didn't have much hair.
Where the special effects got tricky is where the real actors like Frank Bannister had to actually interact with the ghosts. It's one thing to have them talking to each other and looking at each other and getting the eye lines right, but when they actually have to touch each other or pass through each other, that was where things got a little tricky. And I remember one particularly difficult little scene was in Frank's house where Michael Fox has to grab the tail of a dog, a ghost dog, Rustler. And Rustler's racing out along the floor and leaps out of the wall and dragging Frank behind him. And of course Frank can't go through the wall like Rustler can, so Frank slams against the wall and sort of lets go of his tail. This was done by basically giving Michael a little piece of wire that he had to grab and hold on to, and we had guys outside the house pulling on the wire. The great thing about working with Michael Fox is, his eagerness to do as many of his own stunts as he could, which is, great for a director, because you can really sell the idea that it's the actor who's, going through this.
I like to do as much of that stuff as I can do, because I think it's important to be able to tie my face to the action and for the audience to know that it's me. And there are things that look more dangerous than they are. I mean, getting hit by the car. I was walking by the car and I felt the hood of it. I just happened to put my hand on the hood of it, and I think I was talking to Peter, and I noticed how smooth it was. And I said, this is really cool. This would be great to slide across the top of this. And that's a stunt that I've done in a few things where you run and you slide across the hood of a car. And then it just evolved into, it'd be great. The car can come through the crosswalk and just stop short of me, and I'll throw myself back over it and slide right off it. And then the next thing you know, they say, okay, rolling. So you go, what did I just do? What did I just suggest? What the hell am I doing?
We got it all in one shot, and it really, you can see that it's him, getting whacked by this car, and it really, that sort of thing helps the film so much. And I love that stuff. It was ironic that after doing so many of his own stunts, Michael finally does injure himself quite badly, doing something that you wouldn't even describe as a stunt. It was just one of those freak accidents that none of us could have really predicted.
No. No.
Tus trailers. Visita mi canal.
I just stepped in a place that I hadn't stepped before, and there was a hole in the floor of the forest, and just kind of twisted my ankle and popped some tendons and broke a couple bones on the bottom of my foot. Hurt like hell. We had 2 or 3 shots left to do that night, and Michael says, "Look, don't worry, we'll get this done. We'll get this scene finished." And I could tell that his foot was hurting like hell. And in fact, the last shot that we did that night, he had to run along the trees, and you can see very clearly in the movie that he's limping.
And that's it. Ready and action.
The next day, Michael's foot had swollen up and he was barely able to walk. We shot the scene in the restaurant where he's sitting at the table with Lucy having dinner. That was being filmed with his foot in an incredibly painful condition. He could barely walk on it. He had a stick, but he was at least able to sit at the table and and do that scene. But we basically ran out of things that we could shoot with Michael with him running around, and it was clear to us that he just had to get his foot better again before we could carry on with any of his scenes. So the basic thing that happened was the shoot was shut down for a week.
I got a couple days off. I got a couple weeks off.
As much as it may sound mercenary of me, I think that Michael hurting his foot in that way really helped us with the film, because it gave us a little bit of breathing space. We were able to do some more work on the script. I was able to cut together some of the footage we'd shot, and I think we ended up with a better movie, ironically, because that happened. I'm sure Michael probably wouldn't agree quite with me, but I have to be mercenary. I'm the director, and these things sometimes are blessings in disguises.